At 56, you stop being seen. You become part of the background, like the wallpaper no one bothers to look at anymore. You cook, you clean, you wave at neighbors, and nobody really asks how you're doing. Not truly. That was my life. 2 grown children barely called, a house full of echoes, and mornings where I sat staring at my coffee wondering, is this it? No fireworks, no thrill, just fading softly into forgettable. Until he walked in. He wasn't supposed to notice me. He was 19, young, reckless, full of life and ambition, a friend of my son. Dropped by to return a book he borrowed. T-shirt, skateboard, earbuds in. I didn't even lift my eyes when I opened the door. But he smiled, bright, curious, unafraid. "You're Liam's mom," I nodded. He didn't rush off. He asked about the painting on my wall. Then he asked why my hands were paint-stained. That small conversation lasted almost an hour. We talked about art, about dreams, about regret. He didn't look at me like an old woman. He looked at me like a human being, one with stories worth hearing. And it didn't stop there. He came by again, with coffee this time, and a question. "Can I see your studio?" My studio. No one had been in there for years. But I let him in. And that's when life stopped feeling quiet and started feeling alive again. I hadn't stepped into that studio in nearly 5 years. It was dusty, cluttered, frozen in time. Canvas stacked against walls like memories I didn't know how to revisit. But he walked in like it was sacred. Like my forgotten world was a treasure trove. He ran his fingers gently along the edge of a half-finished canvas. "You did this?" His eyes were wide like a kid discovering magic. I laughed nervously. I used to, before everything got busy. What I meant was before my husband left. Before my body started aching in ways I couldn't explain. Before the mirror stopped reflecting someone I recognized. But I didn't need to say it. He heard it anyway. He picked up a brush and smiled. "Show me, please." And just like that, we painted. Not just colors, but laughter, awkward glances, deep talks about pain and joy. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to understand me. That studio became our escape. Every weekend he came over to paint. We did more talking than painting. Sometimes we said nothing at all. There was a silence between us that wasn't empty, it was full. I told myself it was innocent, that I was just lonely, that he was just kind, that this couldn't possibly be what it was becoming. But deep down I knew, when he looked at me, he didn't see 56. He saw me. And I saw hope. For the first time in years. It was bound to happen. Secrets, no matter how soft and sweet, eventually find their way into the light. That day, my son Liam came by unannounced. I hadn't told him about the visits, about the late afternoons full of color and conversation, about how my eyes sparkled differently now. He walked into the studio and froze. There I was laughing, with him. Brushes in hand paint on our clothes, music playing in the background, and no distance between us. "What the hell is this?" His voice cut through the music like a blade. I turned, startled. He looked from me to his friend, his 19-year-old friend, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I opened my mouth to explain. But what could I say? That boy you used to play video games with. He's the reason I feel alive again. No sentence could soften the truth. Liam stormed out. And just like that, the world outside found its way in. Whispers, glares at the grocery store. A friend who stopped calling. And worst of all, my own children didn't pick up the phone. I cried for days. Not because of shame, but because I hadn't expected to be abandoned for choosing joy. The betrayal didn't come from strangers, it came from the people I gave birth to. People who once held my hand and told me I was their whole world. But you know who stayed? He did. That 19-year-old boy who could have run at the first sign of chaos stood by me. "If this costs me everything, you're still worth it," he said. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just a phase. It wasn't a mistake. It was love. The silence from my children was louder than any argument. Worse than shouting was the nothingness. No birthday calls, no Sunday dinners. No, "Are you okay, Mom?" It felt like grief, except no one had died. At first, I begged. I left voicemails. I wrote letters. I even showed up at Liam's door once, only to be turned away like a stranger. And that's when it hit me. I'd spent my entire life trying to fit into a version of myself others could accept. The quiet mom, the polite woman, the aging widow who knew her place. But that version of me was slowly withering. With him, my 19-year-old lighthouse in a storm, I laughed without apology. I danced in the living room barefoot and grinning. I painted for me, not for anyone's approval. I wore red lipstick again. I wore tight jeans again. I wore my heart on my sleeve. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't surviving, I was living. Yes, I lost my children's approval. Yes, friends turned cold. But I gained a kind of love that asked nothing of me but truth. No pretense, no shame, no expiration date. I remember one night curled up beside him, I whispered, "They think I'm crazy, that I've lost everything." He looked me in the eyes and said, "You didn't lose everything. You left everything that was keeping you small. And maybe that's what life is about in the end. Letting go of who they expect you to be so you can finally become who you were always meant to be." We didn't plan to make it public. It just happened. It was a sunny afternoon at the lake where we often went to escape the whispers. He brought a picnic. I brought my camera. He took a photo of me laughing, head tilted back, hair wild in the breeze. Then we took one together, cheek to cheek, his hand holding mine, unapologetically close. That evening, he posted it with a simple caption. "Love isn't about numbers, it's about moments." This one I'll remember forever. The internet exploded. Some comments were cruel. She's old enough to be his grandmother. He must want her money. What a joke. But some were different. Strangers messaged me from across the world. "Thank you for showing me that love after 50 is still possible. My mom just got divorced. I showed her your photo and she cried. You give me hope." I expected shame, but I received solidarity. From women who had been told their time was up. From men who'd buried their hearts under the weight of judgment. From people who saw our story and felt less alone. But the most shocking moment? My daughter called. I hadn't heard her voice in over 4 months. She said, "Mom, I was wrong. You look happy, like really happy. Can we talk?" And that's when I cried. Not from hurt, but from healing. We had dinner the following week. She met him. She even laughed when he called me out for stealing fries from his plate. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. That one photo, a moment of truth, brought both chaos and connection. It broke what needed breaking. And it opened what had long been closed. It was a quiet Thursday night. No grand plans, no candlelit dinner or orchestra playing in the background. Just us, a blanket, an old black and white movie playing in the background. I remember reaching for popcorn when he suddenly turned the TV off. I looked at him puzzled. He smiled nervously. "I don't have a ring yet," he started, "but I have something better." My truth. I froze. Everyone says we shouldn't be. That I'll regret it. That you're too old or I'm too young. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life than this. I want to wake up to your soul, not just your skin. I want to build memories that last longer than judgment. I want to love you in front of the world, even if it laughs. He didn't kneel. He just held my hand. And my heart felt like it had finally found a home. I laughed. I cried. I said yes. Without thinking, without blinking. Because what mattered wasn't the age difference. It was the sameness in how we dreamed, how we saw beauty in the little things, how we loved fully, fiercely, and without shame. Some might say I lost my mind. But I believe I found my life that night. In his arms, in his words. In the unwavering certainty that love, real love, isn't measured in years, but in presence. The next day, he bought a simple silver band. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive. But when he slipped it on my finger, I swear, it felt heavier than gold. It felt real. We didn't want a big wedding, but somehow word spread like wildfire. At first, I hesitated. I imagined the stares, the whispers, the pitying smiles. But he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Let's give them something they'll never forget." Not for the drama, but for the love. So we planned something small, something honest. A garden ceremony at the old community library where I used to volunteer. Tulips in bloom. String lights borrowed from the neighbors. His best friend playing guitar. My best friend crying even before I walked down the aisle. And then there was me, a woman in her late 50s in a white dress, barefoot, trembling slightly, not because I was afraid, but because I never thought I'd be this alive again. He stood at the altar in a navy vest, nervous and glowing like a boy on Christmas morning. But when I reached him, he whispered, "You look timeless." The ceremony was short, but the silence after our vows. That was long, because everyone, my friends, his friends, even a few family members who once disapproved, sat still. Some teary-eyed, some stunned, some visibly unsure what to feel. But no one laughed, no one rolled their eyes. Instead, they clapped. And for a moment, I felt something even stronger than romance. Validation. That what we had wasn't a rebellion, it was a revelation. Later, at the small backyard reception, my ex-husband showed up. Unexpected, uninvited, and yet surprisingly kind. He pulled me aside and said, "I didn't understand. I still don't. But I can see you're truly happy. And that matters more than my pride." I didn't cry. Not until my son walked up, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." That was the moment I realized This wasn't just my wedding. It was a funeral for fear and a celebration of a second chance at life. Marriage changes things. That's what they all say, right? I used to roll my eyes when people said that. After all, we already lived together. We already shared bills, toothbrush drawers, and late-night conversations that stretched until sunrise. But something did change subtly then suddenly. The world didn't magically accept us just because we had a marriage certificate. In fact, some people became even more vocal. Strangers on social media called me names. Desperate. A predator. Pathetic. Some said he must have ulterior motives. That no man that young could truly love a woman my age. Even distant relatives sent passive-aggressive messages like, "Just hope he sticks around when the wrinkles deepen and the money thins out." And inside our own home, little cracks started forming. Not in our love, but in the pressure we felt from trying to constantly prove ourselves to everyone else. He began staying quiet in public, holding my hand, but only when no one was looking. He smiled less during outings, and I couldn't help but wonder, did the world finally get to him? Was the magic we built now starting to erode under the weight of other people's opinions? But then one night, after a particularly nasty online article went viral, calling our wedding a sad spectacle, he sat me down, cupped my face, and said, "I don't care what they think, but I care what you think. And I think you're starting to let their voices become louder than mine." That hit me hard. He was right. I had been internalizing the judgment, carrying the shame like a second skin. Not because I believed it, but because I was tired of fighting it. So we made a decision to stop explaining, to stop apologizing, to stop justifying love like it needed a permission slip. We turned off the noise. We took a break from social media. We booked a weekend away, just us, no phones, no internet, no distractions. And in the stillness of that getaway, we remembered why we chose each other in the first place. Not to prove anything to the world, but to prove to ourselves that love, when real, is worth protecting at all costs. After we unplugged, the world felt quieter, but so did our relationship. It wasn't that we fell out of love, but we had to face something far harder than criticism from strangers' real life. I got sick. It started as a cough, then chest pain. Then fatigue that wrapped itself around me like fog. Doctor visits, blood work, shadows on the scan. At 56, I thought I had already lived my hardest years. Now I was 57 and terrified. He was by my side at every appointment, holding my hand, holding my gaze when I didn't want to look in the mirror. But deep down, I feared something else. What if he didn't sign up for this? What if now that the honeymoon glow is gone, the real me, aging, aching, afraid will drive him away? He never said it, not even close. But I saw the worry in his eyes, and the youth in his step. We were in different seasons of life. And now more than ever, that truth stared me in the face. Then came the day I collapsed in the kitchen. He carried me literally into the car, didn't flinch, didn't panic. At the hospital while I was in recovery, the nurse whispered to me, "Your son, he hasn't left the waiting room for 12 hours straight." I laughed through my oxygen mask. "He's not my son," I said. My voice barely a breath. "He's my husband." They say love shows its truest form when you're at your weakest. And he did. He bathed me, fed me, washed my hair, rubbed my feet, read to me when my hands shook too hard to hold a book. But the most shocking moment came when I woke one afternoon to a room full of flowers and faces I hadn't seen in months. My children. The ones who had shut me out, they stood there, awkward, unsure, until my eldest whispered, "We thought you were just chasing youth." We didn't realize he was chasing you. The real you. The one we forgot to see. And just like that, the wall cracked. They didn't forgive me overnight, but they sat beside me, held my hand, listened. And he, my 19-year younger husband, gave them the space to grieve the mother they felt they'd lost. And find the woman I had become. When I was in the hospital not knowing if I'd ever go home again, I started writing letters. Not emails, not texts. Real handwritten letters. One to each of my children, one to him, one to myself. I didn't write to explain or justify. I wrote to remember. To say the things that got lost in the noise. To my daughter, I wrote, "You were the first heartbeat I heard outside my own. I failed you in ways I didn't see then. I hope you see me now not as a rebel or a fool, but as a woman who finally chose herself." To my son, "I wasn't trying to replace your father. I was trying to find someone who saw me not as mom, but as a whole person." To my youngest, who had been the coldest, "I still make your favorite soup when it rains. I still keep the photo of us at the fair in my wallet. I never stopped loving you, even when you stopped talking to me." But the letter that mattered most was the one I gave to him, folded in half, unsealed. He sat beside my hospital bed when I handed it over, hands trembling. It read, If I go, I want you to know this. You made me feel 25 again, but not because of your age. Because you loved like someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes. You gave me laughter when I was hollow. You gave me mornings I looked forward to again. And you reminded me that love isn't borrowed from the future or rescued from the past. It's now, it's here, it's you. When I looked up, tears ran silently down his face. He bent down and kissed my forehead like it was sacred. That was the night everything changed. The next morning I turned a corner. My vitals improved. My pain eased. Even the nurses said, it's like your body chose to fight again. No, it wasn't just my body, it was my heart. Because when you feel truly seen, truly loved, truly safe, you want to keep living. And that's when I realized this wasn't a story about age gaps or scandal or rebellion. This was a love story, written in letters, and lived one breath at a time. For months after we moved in together, I felt eyes burning into my back. Curtains shifted when I walked by. Smiles tightened into silence. Lawn greetings turned into pitying glances, or worse, disgust. That's the woman who took in a boy young enough to be her grandson. He must be after her money. She'll regret this when he walks out. I knew they whispered. I heard it in the pauses. I saw it in the way invitations stopped coming. But I said nothing, at first, until one Sunday afternoon. He was mowing the lawn in the summer heat, his shirt soaked, a wide grin on his face, laughing as our dog chased the mower. I stood on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade just watching him. That's when Mrs. Callahan, the oldest neighbor on the block, walked past with her little dachshund and said almost under her breath, "It's nice, watching someone actually take care of you for once." I blinked. "Excuse me." She stopped, turned to me with eyes that had seen decades. "I remember when you were with your husband. You always looked tired, smaller, like your light had dimmed. Now you're radiant, girl. People just don't know what to do with joy that breaks their rules." That hit me like thunder in my chest. It wasn't just judgment people were reacting to. It was the threat of someone living fully, out loud, without apology. So the next week I hosted a block brunch. Yes, me, the scandalous older woman with her 2 young partner. We opened our home, cooked together, laughed, served mimosas, and even shared our story when someone finally had the courage to ask. He didn't flinch, didn't hide. He took my hand, looked around and said, "I love her, not for what she gives, not for how old she is, but for the way she makes me feel like I'm home in the world." There was silence, and then soft claps, a few smiles. An awkwardness cracked. Just enough. People didn't stop whispering overnight, but they did start waving again. Then asking for recipes. Then bringing over tomatoes from their garden. Sometimes you don't win people over with arguments. You win them over by living so brightly that they're forced to see the light. And when they do, they stop whispering. They start wondering. Beauty used to be something I chased, a number on a scale, a wrinkle-free face in soft lighting, a compliment thrown like a bone from a distracted husband. It felt fleeting, conditional, like it could vanish if I didn't maintain it. But real beauty. It came to me unexpectedly on a cold Wednesday evening while I stood barefoot in the kitchen, hair-messy old sweater hanging off one shoulder. I was crying, not because I was sad, but because I was chopping onions for our soup and laughing at something ridiculous he had just said. He walked in behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, buried his face in the nape of my neck, and whispered soft, simple, and sincere, "You're breathtaking, just like this, just as you are, right now. No makeup, no dress, no filters. Just me smelling like garlic eyes, watery and socks mismatched. And yet, I felt seen, desired, adored not for how I looked, but for who I was in that moment. That was the day I realized beauty wasn't something I had lost with age. It was something I had never truly owned until I let go of everything I thought it should be. He made me feel beautiful in my silences, in my routines, in the pauses between moments. Not for being young, not for being perfect, but for being present. And from that day on, I stopped hiding from the mirror. Not because the wrinkles vanished, but because I saw me in them and the life that shaped me. I had spent years trying to look beautiful for the world. But I had finally found someone who made me feel beautiful for simply existing. And that my love changed everything. Meeting your partner's parents is nerve-wracking at any age. But meeting his parents when I was 56 and he was 19, let's just say I'd rather relive high school gym class in a swimsuit. I had imagined it over and over, his mother's polite but tight smile, his father's cold handshake. The awkward silences filled only by cutlery tapping against plates. But nothing prepared me for what really happened. They arrived early, dressed neatly, eyes scanning the room before they even saw me. I wiped my palms on my skirt, stood up and extended my hand. "Hi," I said with every ounce of grace I could gather. "I'm Claire." His mother paused, looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my crow's feet, my silver strands. Then to my surprise, she said softly, "You're not what I expected." He cut in quickly. "She's everything I didn't know I needed, Mom, and I love her." There was a beat of silence, the kind that usually precedes an explosion. Instead, his father broke it with a deep sigh. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do you love our son?" I didn't flinch. I didn't smile to ease the tension. I just answered honestly, "With everything I have left in this lifetime, and everything I didn't know I still had." Another pause. Then his mother, quiet, tearful, whispered, "That's the same thing I said to his father 40 years ago." The tension dissolved. We shared coffee, stories, tears, laughter that surprised even them. And when they left, his mother hugged me tight and said, "You may not be the kind of woman I pictured, but you are exactly the kind I'd pray he ends up with." That moment, it didn't erase the judgment from strangers or the whispers from neighbors, but it gave me something stronger, belonging. It was our first anniversary, not of marriage, just of that rainy Tuesday when he first reached for my hand, when everything quieted in my soul. We hadn't planned anything extravagant. No fancy dinners, no photo shoots for the skeptics. Just us, a bottle of wine, and a slow song playing in the background. He handed me a small hand-folded envelope. No stamp, no name, just a heart drawn in black ink. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in his messy slanted print. Simple, unfiltered, real. "Claire, I know the world raised its eyebrows at us. They called you too old, called me too young. They asked what I could possibly want with someone your age, and I've thought about it. I want your fire when you argue with injustice on TV. I want the way you hum when you cook off-key and beautiful. I want how you cry at sad endings, even if you've seen the movie 10 times. I want the peace in your voice when you say, 'Everything will be all right.' I want your stories, your laugh, your scars. I want your wisdom, not just the kind that teaches, but the kind that heals. You are not my second chapter, Claire. You are my first real one. Thank you for choosing me when you didn't have to. Thank you for showing me that love isn't always loud, but it's always brave. Happy anniversary, my always. Jay." I read it once, then again, and again until the ink blurred behind tears. I had been given roses before, dinners, diamonds, but never words like that. Never love like that. And when I die, whether tomorrow or 30 years from now, that letter will be with me, folded close to my heart. The proof that I once lived a love others said I shouldn't, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. There were days I lost things, friends who disappeared without a word, invitations that stopped coming, family who looked at me with eyes full of quiet disappointment, a world that had decided it knew better what love should look like, how long it should last, and who had the right to feel it. But never, not once, did I regret loving him. They said I was foolish. They said he'd leave, that I was just a phase, that the wrinkle in my skin would scare him away, that someday I'd wake up heartbroken and humiliated. But what they didn't see were the mornings, the quiet ones, when I'd open my eyes to his arms wrapped around me like I was the center of gravity. What they didn't see were the Sundays, when we'd sit on the porch reading different books, but under the same blanket. They didn't hear how he'd whisper, "You're my favorite place to come home to," when the world outside felt too loud. Did it cost me things? Yes. Did it hurt sometimes deeply? But I gained something I never had before. A love not built on youth or perfection, but on choice, on presence, on truth. He chose me not in spite of my age, but because of it. Because I knew who I was. Because I wouldn't play games. Because I had nothing to prove, only something to share. And in the end, when I look back on this love, the stares, the whispers, the judgment, they fade, but his laughter, his loyalty, his love that never needed permission, that stays. So no, I never regretted a single day. Because I lived a story that was mine, brave, raw, and scandalously beautiful. And I hope if you've ever stood at the edge of love and fear, you'll jump anyway. Because you just might land in something extraordinary.